Happy Sunday, everyone. Today we are talking about the most quoted non-Mormon in General Conference. Who do you think it is? Well, the Deseret News years ago did a story titled, and here's the apparent answer, C.S. Lewis's writings have profound effect on Latter-day Saints. This article says, and I quote, since 1971, Lewis has been the most quoted non-Mormon in LDS General Conference talks with 31 references compared to 20 for Shakespeare. Okay, this reporter needs to do a little bit better job because that's actually not true. The most quoted person since 1971, since that's the year that this article apparently focused on to start, was not C.S. Lewis. It was actually Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, since 1971 onward, has been quoted, and I counted this myself, 64 times in General Conference, over twice as much as C.S. Lewis. Now, I plan to do a musing on Abraham Lincoln in the future. However, for today, in fact, apparently, contrary to what the Deseret News says, we're not going to talk about the most quoted non-Mormon in General Conference. We're going to talk about the second most quoted Mormon in General Conference. Now, if you stick with me for a little bit, I am going to reveal an exciting announcement. There's a little teaser for those of you watching that I'm really excited about and that somewhat relates to the topic today. So hang on for just a minute. First, we need to unpack a little bit. Why does this guy matter? Why should you care about who C.S. Lewis was and what does he have to do with what's going on today? So C.S. Lewis, he's a professor, or was, professor of medieval and Renaissance literature. First worked at Oxford University, later at Cambridge. He ends up converting to Christianity in 1931. The story goes that he was friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, and they would talk and collaborate and think together. And so the story goes that C.S. Lewis is on a walk with J.R.R. Tolkien, and they're talking about religious stuff, about mythology and symbolism and so forth. So C.S. Lewis goes home that night. He writes about the experience. He basically just starts believing in Jesus Christ, and he's kind of persuaded himself about this kind of narrative and perspective. He ends up joining the Church of England, which Tolkien wasn't in love with because he was Catholic. Now, C.S. Lewis was aware of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was aware of its members, but his references to Mormonism, so-called, is not super sympathetic, shall we say. He apparently received the Book of Mormon from at least one member of the church, and he corresponded with a woman from Utah in which he said, and I quote, I'm afraid I'm not going to be much help about all the religious bodies mentioned in your letter of March 2nd. I have always, in my books, been concerned simply to put forward mere Christianity, and am no guide on these things, most regrettable, interdenominational questions. I do, however, strongly object to the tyrannic and unscriptural insolence of anything that calls itself a church and makes teetotalism a condition of membership. For the uninitiated, teetotalism is the abstinence of alcohol, refusing to drink or prohibiting drinking. So the word of wisdom is a big hang-up for C.S. Lewis, and he strongly objects to the tyrannic and unscriptural insolence of anything that calls itself a church that requires its members not to drink. Wasn't a big fan of the word of wisdom. If you haven't watched my episode on the word of wisdom, my musing on that, you can go to sundaymusings.org, choose word of wisdom from the drop-down, bookmark that one, save it later, check it out. The word of wisdom doesn't say or mean what a lot of us think it does, so you go check that out. But anyway, C.S. Lewis, not the biggest fan. He actually also referenced the Book of Mormon in one of his essays. It's just a very brief and passing reference. And the way he was writing it indicated that he believed the Book of Mormon was just a creation influenced by the Bible. So these are the only references that I could find that other historians have kind of said that there was like some kind of direct reference to or connection with a member of the church or something about the church like the Book of Mormon. So we're going to get into general conference references in just a second. But beyond that, Nibley has been quoted in church publications over 100 times, over 100 times. The early references start with Hugh Nibley. So Nibley was presenting a series of weekly lectures on KSL Radio, and under the title "Time Vindicates the Prophets." This is nothing you'd see on KSL anymore. They're all just, full of nonsense and garbage now, and the church should sell them off. I did a musing on that as well. Again, sundaymusings.org if you want to check that out. So Nibley, he's on the radio, and he refers to C.S. Lewis to this question of Jesus' identity, where C.S. Lewis writes, and I quote, "Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. But don't let us come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He hasn't left that open to us." So this dichotomy, right? Either he was a crazy person or he was what he said he was. So that's Hugh Nibley. Then we get to 1967. Neil Maxwell, he was a teacher at the University of Utah, then an administrator. He's called to be one of the regional representatives for the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And in that year, Maxwell publishes his book called A More Excellent Way. And interspersed throughout that book are a number of references to C.S. Lewis. The first reference to C.S. Lewis in an official church publication was in 1971 in the Ensign. And this was from a professor of child development and children's literature at the University of Utah. He wrote an article encouraging and recommending certain literature for kids. And The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe made the list. So this is the first time C.S. Lewis is referenced in any church literature. The first general authority who's known to cite C.S. Lewis during a public sermon was Marion Hanks. So he was an assistant to the 12 starting in 1968, and he's at an area conference in Manchester, England. And in August of 1971, Hanks announced that some of C.S. Lewis's words would act as a keynote for his remarks that day. Basically, he was going to focus a lot and expound on what C.S. Lewis said. And then he quoted from one of C.S. Lewis's articles, very famous quote from C.S. Lewis that says, "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." Very famous quote from C.S. Lewis. So here's Marion Hanks, who's assistant to the 12 Apostles, quoting it, not in general conference yet, but in some type of public lecture. And there's a ton more. There's from their Ensign articles and books and articles in the BYU Studies Journal. There's BYU courses that get created about C.S. Lewis. Education Week classes, symposia, conferences, all, just starts bubbling up. Hugh Nibley and especially Neil Maxwell are the drivers of this. There was some controversy at times because of how much they were promoting this non-member and his ideas, writing books, doing lectures, holding conferences, all around C.S. Lewis, and trying to kind of connect some of his writings to Latter-day Saint theology. Here, for example, is just a smattering of some of the references in General Conference.
In the words of C.S. Lewis, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man.
C.S. Lewis gave us keen insight into devilish tactics. In a fictional letter, the master devil, Screwtape, instructs the apprentice devil, Wormwood, who is in training to be a more experienced devil.
The following advice given by the deceitful Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood in C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters describes a common malady afflicting many of us today.
In his characteristically memorable prose, C.S. Lewis imagines the Lord saying to us something like this.
C.S. Lewis explained God's transforming power this way.
That day, in the Provo, Utah temple, this statement by C.S. Lewis resonated with me.
Now, will the Lord do for us what he did for Enos and Alma? C.S. Lewis put it this way.
The Christian writer C.S. Lewis described it this way.
C.S. Lewis, the striving, pragmatic Christian writer, poignantly framed the issue.
This is one of the lessons C.S. Lewis teaches us in his well-known Screwtape Letters.
And there's so much more. I mean, there's, Elder Tad Callister. He wrote The Infinite Atonement, a really good book. And he quotes C.S. Lewis more than a dozen times in that book. So again and again, Mormons are loving on this guy. They're seeing in him a lot of kind of Christian commentary that is very amenable and relevant to our own theology. So why do Mormons love C.S. Lewis so much. There's a book called C.S. Lewis, Latter-day Truths in Narnia, where the authors try and kind of make these connections and extrapolate, not similarities, but connections between his writings and our beliefs. And they quote William Clayton Kimball, who's focused a lot on this, and his assessment was the following: "These differences in doctrine do not diminish his power as an articulate ally in the cause of Christian decency. We sometimes forget that there are pearls of great price not produced in our own oyster beds." I thought that was a really cool quote. Okay, so now we're going to go from C.S. Lewis to one of his books, and then from there to the exciting announcement. So the Screwtape Letters is one of his very popular books. Of course, Mere Christianity is up there, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that we talked about. Screwtape Letters gets published in February of 1942. And if you don't know about the book, the very brief summary is that it's a satirical Christian novel that takes the form of a series of letters from a senior demon named Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood, who is a junior tempter. So basically you have a devil training his apprentice. And so Screwtape, the senior demon, he's advising Wormwood on how to corrupt a human soul and lead him away from God. And the person, the soul that Wormwood is tasked with destroying and capturing, is a British man only known as the Patient. The goal with Screwtape helping Wormwood was to guide him toward, quote, our Father below, who is Satan, and then away from the enemy, capital E, which is God. And so the letters explore themes of temptation and human nature and spiritual warfare, and they use this satire, this irony, this clever wit to talk about some important religious lessons. Okay, so this is the Screwtape Letters. It's well worth reading if you're not familiar with it. This satirical approach in particular, I think, is effective. For example, in letter 8, Screwtape is explaining to Wormwood the different purposes that God and the devils each have for the human race. He says, Screwtape, "We want cattle who can finally become food. He," meaning God, "wants servants who can finally become sons." So the effective approach here with this satire in the Screwtape Letters is that C.S. Lewis is illustrating how the bad operates in order to help us understand the importance of and how to pursue the good. Right? So he's not just not another fluffy Christian, this is important, you should live this way, and these are the doctrines, and live the principles, right? There are plenty of those. This is a very creative work that takes the complete opposite approach, says, here's how the devil is trying to come after us. So be on guard for this type of behavior, and do the exact opposite of what you read about in the book. Now, the Screwtape Letters was so successful that it spawned a fan fiction genre, you might say. Here's just a small sample of some of the many books that were inspired by the Screwtape Letters. You've got the Snakebite Letters, devilishly devious secrets for subverting society as taught in Tempter's Training School. You've got Lord Falgrin's Letters. You got the Wormwood Letters, the Screwtape Emails, the Wormwood File, Email from Hell. You've got the Devil's Inbox, or the Gargoyle Code, Lenten letters between a master tempter and his diabolical trainee, or the Michael Letters, Heaven's answer to Screwtape. Final example, As One Devil to Another, a fiendish correspondence in the tradition of C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. Now, important to note, all of those examples carry the same theme. It's using this satirical approach to advance Christian religious arguments. All of that fan fiction is still all about God and the devil and man. Okay? So despite there being a lot of people inspired by the Screwtape Letters and C.S. Lewis's work, they're all still confined to religion. So last year, I had this idea pop in my head, and I realized that that approach would work very effectively to teach political and economic truths, much like the Babylon Bee uses satire to illustrate the absurdity of a bad idea so that we can better understand the good. So that is the exciting announcement. I am launching a new series of books, starting with 3 of them, called Backward Blueprints. If you understand the reference there, this is the blueprint on how to do something that is backwards, opposite of what is good. We got 3 books. I'm going to read a brief portion of one of them just so you can kind of see how this satirical approach works. We have How to Raise an Uncritical Thinker, 10 Ways to Ensure Your Child Doesn't Question Anything. We've got How to Cripple a Currency, 10 Methods to Devalue Money. And then How to Destroy a Country, 10 Strategies for Sinister Success. So we got 3 books to start. These are short books, 100 pages long each. They're meant to be quick reads, teens and up, though we're probably focusing more on kind of young adult and parents. But teens will be able to read this fine. Short, quick reads, really designed to point out, like the Screwtape Letters, the bad, so that we can understand the good. Now, this launches July 22nd. However, we're actually shipping already because we just got these in at our warehouse. You can go to backwardsblueprint.com. That's singular, backwardsblueprint.com, and you can get the bundle of books. We'll ship them immediately. You'll get them well in advance of launch. If you prefer waiting for launch or want to order on Amazon, then you can go to backwardsblueprint.com/Amazon, and that'll take you right to the series page on Amazon where you can add these to your cart and buy it there. It's going to be cheaper to buy it directly from us. You're going to get it immediately. But some of you like Amazon and your one-click whatever and Prime shipping and all that. So backwardsblueprint.com. And then if you want Amazon, just throw a /Amazon there on the end. Okay, I'm going to read a brief portion of one of these. Let's do How to Raise an Uncritical Thinker. By the way, I'm working on book 4 right now in this series. I plan to write a few more. And if you know anything about Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I am doing a book that is the exact opposite, How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. And so that is a fun, that's one that I'm having a lot of fun writing. All right, so I'm going to open up How to Raise an Uncritical Thinker and read a brief portion. Here you go. Johannes Gutenberg broke the world. His invention of the printing press in the mid-15th century destabilized the world order and empowered people to learn and act in ways they were utterly unprepared for. Gutenberg developed the technology of movable type, allowing printers to arrange letters and symbols with ease. This meant a drastic acceleration in reproducing books and a radical reduction in the cost of doing so. Of course, many see this invention as a positive, a burst of progress for humanity that should be praised rather than panned. They think that the democratization of knowledge was an important leap forward for mankind, empowering the average individual with information that could improve their station in life. But this is a myopic view that fails to take into account all the dangers that arose as well. For example, the loss of hierarchies. What once was an ordered society became turbulent and unpredictable, as individuals were more easily able to challenge those in authority and empower themselves. Or overwhelming amounts of choice. You've now no doubt eaten at restaurants where there are dozens or hundreds of items on the menu. It's exhausting. Life is made more efficient when people are presented with limited options. Or the rise of unverified expertise. If anyone can publish a book or claim knowledge of something, how can the average individual trust whether these non-credentialed individuals are actually experts? Or the erosion of traditional values. With new ideas, cultures, and beliefs easily accessible, there was a risk of individuals veering away from the time-honored values and norms of society. Or finally, the risk of rebellion. Empowered individuals start questioning the systems in which they exist, leading to uncomfortable debates, protests, or even revolutions. A blissfully ignorant populace is a compliant one, and that creates more stability in society. Fortunately, these dangers were mitigated over time by centralizing the production of information. The rise of media conglomerates and newspaper magnates who owned and operated the vast majority of information production. With a few people in charge of the news, the elite were able to still guide what could and could not be said, thus ensuring that the populace felt informed without actually being so. That is, until the internet. The chaotic emergence of this technology signaled a chaotic shift in the control and distribution of information, threatening the established order that once wisely limited discourse to a select few. This supposed digital revolution recklessly handed out the keys to the knowledge treasury, allowing every Tom, Dick, and Harry to not only devour, but also spew content without the necessary checks and balances of expert intermediaries. Consequently, the masses, ill-equipped as they were, began voicing their so-called narratives, recklessly questioning time-honored viewpoints, and muddying the waters of a once orderly global dialogue. In a regrettable twist, this new landscape scattered power like breadcrumbs, feeding the whims of an unchecked majority. But there's still hope. While society trends toward creating an army of critically thinking citizens, you can do your part within the walls of your own home to stem the tide. After all, society is made up of individuals, and the young ones in your care are especially impressionable. They're at an age where their minds are more malleable. This means you can help spare them from the stresses and unpredictability of independent thinking in the future by carefully restraining their thoughts today. It's like the old story of the elephant and the rope. It's said that baby elephants can be trained by tying one of their legs to a stake in the ground, and because they're small, only a small rope is needed. They might resist initially and tug at the rope, but eventually they realize that the rope is not breakable, and so they give up. And as the story goes, that elephant grows mightier and stronger, but can still be restrained with a thin rope, since their minds have been trained to believe that the rope can still keep them bound. This is the role you play as parent, putting mental ropes around your child's mind to help secure their future. Instead of being a threat to the world order, you can help your child stay in their lane and focus only on what's within their proper and limited view. Instead of challenging authority, they can worry about only challenging themselves. Realizing what's at stake, let's begin our journey and explore how to raise an uncritical thinker. All right, so chapters in this one, for example, to give you an idea of the 10 ways to ensure your child doesn't question anything: enforce obedience, prohibit dissent, censor generously, standardize their thinking, distract and consume, praise conformity. Lots of fun topics. So that's how to raise an uncritical thinker. As I said, we've got how to cripple a currency. Very relevant topic today with all the inflation and economic nonsense going on. So this was fun to write, and I think will be a big hit. Finally, how to destroy a country. If you were going to topple a country, how would you do it? How would you destroy a country from within? So C.S. Lewis, Screw Tape Letters, he's the inspiration. Super effective approach, but no one was doing this for political and economic and civic type ideas. And so I thought the same formula could be applied. Hope you guys enjoy this. Again, backwardsblueprint.com is where you can go to get these 3 new books. There's a bundle. You can buy a second bundle to give away as gifts if you want. These are smaller books, 100 pages a pop, quick and easy to read. You can read one in one sitting. But I think your kids, your older kids, are going to really enjoy this. More to come. This is, as I said, the start of a new series. I'll probably do a few more in this series before we wrap up. But I think you guys are all going to love it. So thanks to C.S. Lewis for the inspiration. The second most quoted non-Mormon in General Conference. We'll do a musing some other time about the first, Abraham Lincoln. But in the meantime, again, backwardsblueprint.com. Check out the books. Or if you want Amazon, backwardsblueprint.com/Amazon. Hope you guys grab a set. Appreciate your support. Spread the word. Post about it with your friends. I'd love to hear what you think about the books. Send me a DM. Reach out to me online once you get them. I'd love to know what you think, since this is kind of a brand new thing that I'm trying out. Now with these published, I think I've written 48 books total. So I'm on my journey towards 100, which is my life goal, to write 100 books. So these were really fun to work on. And just yesterday I was working on book 4 again. So more to come, but I would welcome feedback. So please grab a set, backwardsblueprint.com, give them a read. You can leave a review on Amazon to help boost it, or you can, DM me as well. I'd love to get your input and feedback as I continue working on this. Have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next week.